That's it. Okay. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Between Two Teachers. And today is Friday, August the 28th. And we have lots of news, things happening in education. My name is Consuelo Lara.
I'm Madeline Cronenberg, and as always, we join you today from the sacred land of the Chochenyo Kharkhin Ohlone Nation, because it's an important thing for all of us to remember the lands of the peoples that we're on. I wanted to do a little shout out to all of the teachers and students and families everywhere who are now back in school. And in some parts of the world, they're back completely because there has been such a positive response to the ending of COVID-19 and the coronavirus. So there are places where students are back in, and some of them are doing social distancing, and some of them aren't. And also in the United States, besides the European experience that you can read about, they're also in different states, because some states have squashed the coronavirus down to below 1%. And so they're but they're also not letting people from California with these kinds of quarantine rules against people from other states, and that's certainly what we have today. Uh, it's a complicated thing. You read about what's going on from community to community, and the biggest complication was or one of them that I read about was in New Jersey, where people are in one community. New Jersey has many different school districts. They basically have one school district for each town, so that they have as many school districts in the state of New Jersey as we have in a much bigger state, the state of California. So they're smaller, and then each district has a board, and the board makes the decisions about reopening. But as we have here, what happens is the staff don't necessarily live in the district. They could live one town over or two towns over. And if you have a town that says we're ready to reopen and the community is ready to reopen and the spread in their community is very, very low, and the governor said they could reopen, but the teachers don't live there. The teachers and staff live in other cities, and the communities they live in are not reopening, and they need to be home with their children. So what's happened is they're not available to teach. They're not available to come in. And so one of the school districts that the superintendent had to send a letter out and rescind the opening. And they had done every single box. They had checked all the boxes. They had all of the sanitizers. They had cleaned out their HVAC systems. They had done everything. What they didn't anticipate was that their staff would all request waivers, health waivers, to say, we can't come in because we have to be home with our kids.
Yep. Childcare issue.
Childcare.
Yep.
It's a major issue here. Oh, in our community, we don't have the problem. We're ready to come in. So they couldn't provide it, and they weren't providing it. So that may be the next thing. It's been done before. I've done it as an adult school teacher where I taught. I had childcare. I always had childcare because it was provided on my site, because the adult school offered a program for students to become childcare providers. And we had a very large childcare center, and there had many adults, because the adults were the students learning to provide preschool. And the children who were able to take advantage of that were staff children, the children of staff like me, and children of all of our students. So that's why we had a very big adult school, because there was no reason ever for a parent not to be able to come to our school.
Yeah. Yeah, how awesome that is. That's what needs to be done. I think in Monterey Unified School District for years they've had it as an childcare, free childcare for their teachers as one of the incentives to come work there. And so now it was really easy to just use that and expand it. And so childcare is not an issue for Monterey Unified School District. So yeah, it's going to continue. There's so many models, good models out there.
There absolutely are. So it's just a question of political will, whether or not you want to do it, right? And I think it's really time for folks to say, look, this is important. This really does need to be done, right? And so if you've already had the program for what in the adult school, what we had was preschool. There's no reason you couldn't expand that in the extraordinary times we're in, and have it be up through 6th grade.
Yep.
I mean, you could do that.
Yeah, and it's not just the school district, the whole community, the cities, the counties, the agencies, that all of them could form a partnership and make this happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they've done it in San Francisco. In San Francisco, because they have it, and they also have funding from their children's budget and a particular funding stream that's available to them. So they are ahead of the game as far as that goes, and I'm sure other communities are too. But I really think that everybody needs to look at who the leaders are in childcare, because that is one of the major issues about successfully bringing everybody back into the classroom. And the great news would be if we were able to continue it after whenever it is that all of this is over, right?
Yeah, absolutely necessary. Absolutely. So it was a problem before COVID, and now it's an emergency at this point. So we can't go back. We've got to fix it and address it for sure. All right.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right. So the other things I just wanted to mention in the CARES Act, the federal government has the CARES Act, and one of the consequences of it not being passed, it has a part that deals with providing for receiving free and reduced lunch. And what we have had is free and reduced lunch. Over this summer, they had a program called Seamless Summer. And essentially what that allowed was for districts to be reimbursed for all of the feeding programs they were running. And that has not been continued. The reimbursement is not continued. So now what you have is you're only reimbursed for the children who are signed up for, the families that are signed up for the free and reduced lunch program. So this has diminished the accessibility of the funding. So I'm going to put a link in here to write to Congress. Of course, it's passed in the House of Representatives, and it's all languishing in the Senate. But nonetheless, people need to make the case and be aware of the fact that this is one more trimming here. This whole food insecurity problem is being exacerbated by the fact that we're now just arbitrarily not choosing to continue the funding stream that was there.
Yeah, we need that. So that's a good call to action.
Yeah,
Food.
That's our call to action. Then the other conversations we've had, there are just a couple. There's the whole thing around how different districts are doing attendance and distance learning.
Mm-hmm.
Whether we have to see you or not see you, which brings in the whole idea of what are the privacy issues around requiring students to turn on their cameras or not. And there are lots of issues around that. And the other one is Zoom bombing, which has been happening a lot in the first 2 weeks of school.
Yeah. I'm trying to stop that. I know. And then some people are giving a grade for engagement, or at least a attendance grade for attendance for engagement, who you're not physically there, but you're engaged in the lesson, in the instruction, even though you're not physically. And that, if we do the project-based learning, that's basically what that would entail, because you're off creating something, or that would be a way of, and you're still engaged. So,
well, you could be there with your camera, just not with your camera on. Just because you want the privacy. So it could just be your picture, right? And then what they're saying is, if that's the case, what you can email or text your teacher and say, yeah, I am here. I just have my camera turned off. Or your camera could be broken. I mean, there are all kinds of things that can happen in families with equipment, right? And with, honestly, the other thing is with bandwidth, with Wi-Fi. If you turn your camera off, your Wi-Fi is stronger because it doesn't have to carry that extra wave. So
That
that's
makes
another, there are all these
sense.
things about it.
Yes. Okay.
All
Attendance.
sorts of things. Tips. So teachers and students and families can, they call it Zoom like a Zoomie, and just really understand all of the implications of Zoom and how you can build community. That's a real effort across the country for the first 2 weeks of school to have teachers build community with new, because they now have new students, right? It's a different experience than in the spring. You have children you were with all year, and now you're trying to adapt to this new medium here of being on virtual. Now you don't know any of these children, because if you're not looping, they're all new, and so now you've got to figure out how to develop relationships with a whole new set of children. And in our high schools, that could be, I mean, even for me, when I used to have a different set of students every hour for 6 or 7 periods. That's a lot of connecting that we're expecting folks to do.
Yeah. And one of the ways we're addressing it, a couple of things is there's homeroom. They have homeroom. They've put that into some of the schedules. You know, they've given enough flexibility to different schools. And then the other thing is the Wellness Fridays as
Right.
well. So, yeah, I mean, I think our district has given a real priority to that issue of social emotional well-being of everybody, the
Yeah.
students and employees.
Well,
So
it's been identified as a problem that it is, and that's the really good news, right? It's been identified.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
So there's
Okay.
lots of tips on that, and so then we get to what's happening in West Contra Costa. You've had a lot going on this week in your last board meeting. I know there was a big goodbye to Mr. Walton.
Yes, yes. Everybody wanted to say goodbye to him. That was very nice. It was very nice. So we did that for sure. And we moved the student comments up to the beginning to the of the meeting. And I thought that went very well. And I'm
Thank
glad
you
we
very
did.
much.
Yes, that was so glad we did that. So the big thing was the MOUs with the about the opening of school. So back to school, we discussed the first 2 weeks. Our um, superintendent gave a nice presentation about that, and gee, all the partnerships they're doing and all of the, you know, science and research that they're using to make these decisions. It's really, he's got one picture of a making the plane as we're flying it, you know. So there's a pieces of plane out in the sky, and you're trying to put that all together as we go along, making it up, trying to do it as we go along. And you know, somebody said, yeah, in the fall we were in emergency education, but now you're not. You know, as long as we're not back in and there's no vaccine and we're not back in those buildings, we're still in emergency education. I you know, disagree with that idea. So anyway, we did pass the MOU for phase 2, and that was, you know, the result of all 5 bargaining units came together, and so we're very happy about that. That it was a 4-to-1 vote to pass that. That was very good. And there was an issue about there's some new jobs coming up, the social emotional director, and then also
That's elevating this whole idea of social emotional learning, right? And
yes,
that's a real response to what's happening in the world.
absolutely, absolutely. So that was really great. And then you know, and the discussion came up of, well, these positions, they should have been principals. Can we put that as a requirement or suggested, or you know, what came to mind to me is as we try to do diversity, equity, and inclusion, we got to look and think about how many barriers are you putting for people to advance. I mean, is it really necessary for them to have been a principal? Let's think about that. And who are you shutting out because of that?
Right.
And that if you look at
Right.
diversity, you've got to look at the consequences of those things. I mean, so that was what came to my mind. But luckily, they put just preferred. They didn't put it as required. But every time these equity and job descriptions, we've got to keep that in mind because not everybody gets the opportunity to get those requirements, whatever
Right.
they may
Right.
be.
And the way you change it is that you change it, right?
Yep.
That
Yes.
you have to recognize that what job descriptions do is provide barriers. That's the flip. We think of, oh no, and I understand this. The people who write them think, oh no, I'm looking at the skill set. But are you really looking at the skill set or are you looking at the privileges that somebody had?
Yes. Yes. And then
That's
and
the
we have high
big question.
standards, but yeah, the privileges. That's right. That's right. So as we move along, that's a real important thing. But luckily, it was um, I didn't have a chance to bring it up, but that was important to say. And about I did comment about hiring in-house as much as possible. We have so much in-house talent, and we already went through the experience of hiring a great person. Guess what? They got a better job somewhere else at the last minute. So then you got to start all over again. So hiring
And
from in,
this is so typical because what happens is if it's not somebody in house, one would expect they're not only applying to one place. They're never only applying to one place. That would be
absolutely.
foolish, right? So they are applying to multiple places and then they're balancing the responses that they get. The more talented they are, the more positive responses they're going to get.
Yep, absolutely. And then, so yeah, those were the big issues for the district right now. And going forward, where the updates and the communication that we're getting, things change very quickly. So check the website and wait for a communication from our superintendent. I think he's really good at keeping us informed on these things in a timely manner because he has to be. Things are changing so quickly.
Well, and now we have the overlay of the fires.
Oh, that's right. That was another thing too. Air quality, and the air quality, it affected the back to school nights and it affected the food distributions. So yeah, things will be
They're
changing.
the ones that get affected the most because everything else is being done virtually, right?
Yes.
So school actually, which might have been closed because and would have been closed because of the fires, because we had the same problem that did close the schools last year when we had those fires, and we could have them again. I mean, there's no reason to think we're not going to have them again,
Yep.
right? That's one of the things about distance learning is that it's a mechanism for us to use
Yes. Yes.
if even once, God willing, coronavirus, sense of climate change, right? And we haven't done anything to really mitigate against that. So it's really important that we pay attention to what's going on with the fires, and also that we had teachers who were evacuated.
Yeah, that's true.
It was the same kind of problem like the superintendent in New Jersey had, because your staff doesn't necessarily live in the
Yes.
district.
Yeah. So you got to
All right.
account for
So
that.
if you have 4 or 5 teachers who live especially when there were so many evacuations, they're not going to teach. I mean, that's it. They're gone, and you have to then have your substitute system,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Oh yeah.
No one has really put a strong
Oh,
virtual substitute system
that's right. Oh, it's so complicated. There's so many layers to this.
into place, as far as I can see.
Yes.
Yeah,
And the big question now, the big area is what about special ed? A lot of questions about that. Need, coming forward, how do we serve them? And then also the low numbers of preschool, kindergarten. We've got to address that. So, you finish with one issue and some more come up. So those are really important. Um, so that's it for me, but I have a couple of shout outs. I just wanted to have a shout out to West County Digs and Urban Tilth because we have school gardens and I would like to see them expanded. Speaking of food, they could be
Yeah.
used, those school gardens, to, help the the neighborhood families with some fresh fruits, vegetables, herbs, things like that. And
Right.
so yeah, that's a resource right there we could expand and we could use. Food is going to be an issue for a while as well. So yeah, those are my two shout outs. Yep.
Because but the big one, there's the big one up at the old Adams site. That was the one that was run by the urban agriculture program that used to be at Richmond High. So I don't know who's still working there, if anybody's working there now, but that big farm exists up there on that property. And that was
Wow.
used, that was when they would bring boxes of food to the school and give them out to the community members. They did that for years.
That's what we need.
Right?
That's what we
So
need.
Urban Tilth was very involved in that. And West
Yes.
County Dig. So both of those organizations.
Yeah.
So it's a problem now because we're not at our sites, right? The teachers are and the students are not there.
Yeah.
So,
It is.
but we'll be back.
Yeah.
Be
for
back.
sure. And there's
But
always
it's
community people. There's always, there's ways we can certainly, yeah, expand and enhance those. All righty.
all right. I think that's it. I think that I just want to give a shout out to everybody who's successfully gotten back to teaching and to learning, which is really what we're all about here in education. So let's all, work together and look for ways to help each other, right? Instead of
Patience. Have
yes,
patience with each other.
be patient. Be patient with your Zoom connections, right? And be patient with everybody. And now we're ready for our comedy from Carlos.
Okay. And because in honor of the Republican convention, I asked him for some Republican themed.
It has just ended last night. So here we have. We rarely have a Republican themed comedy, but today we do.
Okay, go ahead.
Go.
Okay.
Got to read it. You want me to read it?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
I have. Why do Republicans use two hands when they're drinking out of a water bottle?
Why do Republicans use two hands when they're drinking out of a water bottle?
It's to prevent it from trickling down. A little trickle down joke.
That trickling down. Oh my God, that kills us. The trickle down. Yeah, trickle
Yes,
down.
nothing like the trickle down. That's the trickle down that actually works. The other trickle down doesn't.
Never
All
did.
right, well, thank you all. We'll see you next time on Between Two Teachers.
Bye-bye.